Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today. It's the 3 Loved ReReads tag, which I saw first on Leah's channel, Hyde Seek, which a BookTube channel that I absolutely love. I've praised it before. I will leave a link down below. You should all go and subscribe. She's wonderful. And she originally did the tag. The tag was originally created by Amy at Polyreader, who is a fellow Australian. Leah introduced me, her video introduced me to Amy's channel, and I loved it as well. These are 2 great BookTube channels. And the idea is to look back into the past on 3 books that meant a lot to you a long time ago and reassess them, reread them, and see how they hold up. And of course, I'm always on board for doing that. I absolutely love that as a reading exercise. Now, Amy on Polyreader mentioned that if she goes back 10 whole years, then she would have been 18. And coincidentally enough, that's exactly true for me as well. So we're going to look back 10 years on what I thought were really standout reads when I was 18. And coincidentally enough, I actually enumerated them on my old literary book blog, Steve Reads. On Steve Reads every year, I do a year's best and worst list. But I'd only just started out back in 2008. Back then, I was only doing 10 books. Best books, no worst, just 10 best books. And that was it. That was all. No subcategories, no genres of any kind. Now, my best list at the end of the year is around 100 books. More than that, maybe. But back then, it was only 10 books. So I went back and I looked at that list, and what I'm going to do is either pull down and reread if I still have them, or hunt down and reread every one of these and see how they stand up, because that's the fun of this tag. And the books are Brian Lee's Bats at the Library, which is his sequel to Bats at the Beach. His original is a kid's book. It's a children's illustrated book. And Bats at the Beach, the idea was that when everybody goes home and goes to bed, the bats come out and use the beach. And they have sunglasses on, and they're moonbathing instead of sunbathing. In Bats at the I thought Bats at the Beach was just adorable. I loved it. And I didn't think it could be topped. And Bats at the Library tops it. Somebody accidentally in a small town library leaves a window open overnight, and the bats, when they find out, are just tickled pink because it means they can go in and enjoy the books. And they do. They tell each other stories, and they reenact scenes from books, and it's utterly delightful. I don't know that I'm going to find a copy of Bats at the Library, and I'm pretty sure that I don't still have one. I'm pretty sure that the first dyed-in-the-wool librarian that I encountered after I bought a copy, I just gave the book to. I'm pretty sure that happened. That would have been 10 years ago when I was 18. Because as great a book as it is to give to kids to get them to understand how wonderful libraries are, and also how wonderful bats are, so they don't scream when they see a bat, it's even better to give to an actual librarian. It's just it's just wonderful. So I don't know if I'm going to find that, but I'll look for it and see. And then the number 2 on that list from 10 years ago was The Serpent's Tail by Ariana Franklin. Her follow-up to the Mistress of the Arts of Death, her great historical murder mystery about a young woman who was trained to be a doctor. In one of the only places, in the Middle Ages, she was trained in the 1180s to be a doctor. In one of the only places in the Western world where women were trained on equal footing with men. And then she's called to England, in the first book, Mistress of the Arts of Death, to solve a crime, to figure out who killed a group of small children, to use what we would consider now to be forensic science to figure that out. But because England is still stuck in the Middle Ages, she can't even have people know that she's in charge. She has to act like her manservant is the doctor. Because the idea of a female doctor just wouldn't fly at all. She'd be burnt at the stake instead of helped or listened to. And the main character is wonderful. She is wonderful. Oh, you want so bad for her to have a little real world sense because she doesn't have any. You want to look out for her the whole time. And the Henry II is King of England at the time when she comes over, and he has a very hard-edged look at the whole subject. He's the one who sent for his cousin in Italy to Sicily to send me a doctor, and he didn't specify the genre, and he got a woman, and he's very squinty-eyed about it. He's really well done in these books. He's a difficult character to capture well in fiction, and Ariana Franklin does. And in the second book is about the forensic investigation into the death of Henry's mistress, Rosamund Clifford. It doesn't get any more personal than that. So our heroes have to thread not only political but personal landmines to get to the root of this mystery about Rosamund Clifford, who took over Henry's life while Henry's wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, was in prison, as is immortalized in Jim Goldwyn's play and then later movie, The Lion in Winter, where Eleanor has a wonderfully venom-dipped moment about. She has a couple of great moments about Rosamund Clifford. He found Miss Clifford in the mists of Wales. Liking what he saw, he brought her home for closer scrutiny. He loved her deeply, and she him. But when he had to choose between his lady and my lands... and I remember loving the book. The bloom had got off the rose just a bit, in the sense that Mistress of the Arts of Death was an amazing discovery. You know, so the second, third, fourth, fifth book in the series, they can all be every bit as good or even better. But that thrill, that one element is missing, and I might have judged the book too harshly for that, but I'm sure I'll see a copy. And when I don't have any Ariana Franklin here, I don't even have any copies of the Mistress of the Arts of Death, because every time somebody asks me for a great historical murder mystery, I give it to them. But anyway, the next book is also historical fiction. It's Lavinia by the late Ursula Le Guin. She takes a character from classical poetry, from Virgil's Aeneid. In Virgil's Aeneid, tells the story of Aeneas, the Trojan warrior who takes a hardy band of soldiers and his father and his son and escapes from the destruction of Troy and goes a-wandering, Odysseus style. But Aeneas has a higher calling. He has a mission that Virgil, the poet, has given him, which is to found Rome. So we know where he's headed. We know, just like Odysseus, we know he's going to end up at home. With Aeneas, it's the same way. We know he's going to end up at home, but he wanders along the way. And when he finally gets to Italy, of course, the people who are already there don't want to found Rome. They already have a home and a kingdom, thank you. So it means warfare, and also state marriage. And Lavinia is the Italian woman that Aeneas marries. And despite that figure of rather significant importance, Virgil doesn't let her speak. She doesn't have any lines in the Aeneid. And Ursula Le Guin had the inspired idea of writing a whole historical novel about her. And I remember loving it. And it'll be bittersweet, of course. I think I have still a copy of Lavinia. It'll be bittersweet to read it, because we live in a world now without Ursula Le Guin, and that's not very nice. But if I don't have a copy, I'm sure that I can find one. One of the aids here for doing this tag will be the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston and all of the secondhand shops that I have access to. I have access to a fire hose of secondhand books, so I should be able to come across quite a few of these. And I think according to the original tag, you're only supposed to do 3, so I might be overdoing it anyway. Then the next book, from 2008, was American Made by Nick Taylor, which was a very unlikely thing to catch my interest. I read the description of it and thought, well, there's, I'll slog my way through it just to see what he does with the subject, but there's no way that it'll be interesting. It's a history of the WPA, the federal work program that was instituted by President Roosevelt to dig the country out of the Great Depression. And it follows the WPA over a long period of time, and all of its figures and its projects and its politics, and I thought, there's no way, and Nick Taylor knocks it out of the park. It's a fantastic book. It doesn't have a dull page anywhere in it, when I thought the whole thing would be dull. So I'll look for that. I never see copies of it, but maybe I'm not looking for them, so I'll give it a try. The next one is by George Pendle, and it's Death, a Life. It's a novel. It's the biography of death told as a novel, and it's very funny. It's right from the author's bio at the back of the book. It's very funny, and it just keeps going from there. Pendle even manages in a dry, very British way to work in a plot, but it's a hoot, and I do see that. I know I don't have a copy, but I do see that. So really, I guess this tag will shake out to the first 3 of these that I see. I will just reread. I don't know how many of them I have here. I might not even have 3. But the next one is a Loeb Classical Library. It was one of the greatest things that came out in 2008. I've mentioned the Loeb Classical Library series here before. It's put out by University of Harvard University Press, and it's these little volumes, these little hardcovers with the ancient Greek or the Latin on one side of an ancient work and an English translation on the other side. And in 2008, Loeb came out with a multi-volume translation of The Learned Banqueters by Athenaeus, who no one knows. No one outside of the classicist world even knows this author, and they should, because The Learned Banqueters is wonderful. It's hilarious and thought-provoking and even touching at times. And this is a new translation. I thought it was fantastic. I will never see it. There's no way at all that I will ever see it. This will not be one of my beloved rereads. But then, in terms of getting back to fiction, the next book on that list from 2008 was Little Brother by Cory Doctorow, which was fascinating at the time for me for a whole bunch of reasons, not least of which was that Doctorow put an electronic version of the novel online for free and encouraged people to read it there. And that very much fits with the idea of the book. The idea of the book is very... I don't know if now, 10 years later, it will still strike me, but at the time it struck me as very cutting edge in terms of not so much technology, but the way we think about technology, the way technology works in our lives, with a cast of very young characters that just won me over completely. So, and I see Little Brother all the time, so that one might be one of the rereads. And then we go to history, American Civil War history, Shenandoah 1862, by Peter Cousins, who tells the story of the legendary Confederate General Stonewall Jackson fighting in the Shenandoah Valley, which those of you who aren't from America, or those of you who are in America and don't travel much, the Shenandoah Valley is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. You have to see it to really know. I don't think I could do it justice in an hour of describing it. But during the American Civil War, General Jackson led an army, a small, ragtag, often barefoot and very hungry army, into the Shenandoah, designed to keep the much larger Union armies occupied, distracted from what was going on anywhere around them. And he did an incredible job. And because he did an incredible job, his feats in the Valley have inspired a lot of mythology and a lot of tall tales and, hero worship and whatnot. And Cousins' book cuts through that like a hot knife through butter. It's incredible. He's a really good storyteller, but he doesn't let any mythology creep into his story, which is fantastic. That doesn't often happen. And then the next book on the list was a surprise for me, I remember at the time, and I have never seen a used copy of it, so I'll have to keep an eye out for it, because this is actually one that I'd be curious to know how it will be the second time through. And that's A Mercy by Toni Morrison, which is a slim historical novel, very dreamy thing, surreal, often surreal, and very poetical, set in pre-revolutionary America, and dealing with slaves and indentured servants and bondspeople, and just, it has the sketch of a plot, but it's really about freedom and all the different ways you can lose it. And I went into it just stern-eyed, because I'm one of those rare readers who just does not like Toni Morrison's fiction. I just don't like it. Even the novels of hers where I recognize the ambition, and where I recognize even some of the eloquence, and where there's an endless stream of fans, I still don't like them. And so I went into A Mercy thinking, well, there's no way at all, and I really, really liked it. And I don't know, you never know how much your reaction to any book is just an outgrowth of other things. Were you feeling ill that day? Was the rest of your life going well that day? That sort of thing. I like to think that I have read enough and trained myself well enough so that very little of that gets through in my assessment of a book. But you never know. I've certainly known it to be true. I've known it myself to do it. And I'm not saying that the only reason I like Toni Morrison is because I had indigestion or something like that. I'm just wondering, that's all. It's cases that stand out like that. It's one of the only things she's ever written that I've liked in any way, and I loved it. And that seems odd. So that's another one where I'd very much like to reread it. And then the last one from that list, back when I was 18, was one of those oversized National Geographic books called Animal Life that I know I will never see. There's no way that I will ever get it. I could email National Geographic and ask for them to send me one out of the warehouse, but you have only so many bullets in that gun, and I prefer to use it for something when I'm on deadline or I need a desperate favor or something like that, not for a whim. And so I will look around, but this is the sort of thing that doesn't turn up used in bookstores. Not much. So I'll look for it. But that's it. Those are my candidates. So basically, to do this tag without overdoing it, instead of doing 10 items like I originally thought, I will just do the first 3 of these that I find, and then I will report back. I will come back and let you know how my reactions changed, or if they did, or whatnot. And the only thing that's left for me to do is tag people, and I don't know who to tag, because... Well, I don't know. Quite a few booktubers, I get the impression that well, I guess the gap between when you do it and when you first read these books doesn't have to be 10 years. Quite a few of you are younger than my 28 years, right? So I like, for instance, what if Anthony Andrews, ask him to do this tag? What's he going to do? He's a small boy, so he would have to do things that he read 2 years ago. But for instance, The Empress of Bailing, Sean the Book Maniac. What books were you bailing on 10 years ago? Or what about Britta? What were you reading 10 years ago? If we set the interval at 10 years, what were you reading 10 years ago? And how does it stand up now? How awesome that would be! Or what about Mark at Richards and Reads? What you probably have your books from 10 years ago on your shelves in that incredible library of yours. What were you reading 10 years ago? You keep that reading notebook of yours. What was in there, and what do you think of it now if you were to revisit it? But really, anybody. I just wanted to get this tag out there because I loved it. Because I love rereading, and I love revisiting old certainties as well. That's a lot of fun as a reader. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.